Hey y'all, what's up? My name is Jess. Welcome back to my garden here at Roots and Refuge Farm. Today we're doing our weekly garden tour. This is the 10th week of our growing season here in 2020 in Central Arkansas, Zone 7B. There's been right at about 10 weeks since our last frost. We actually had a late frost this year, so the garden is just slightly behind what it usually is. That's okay, still producing a lot and definitely keeping me busy. I do share these garden tours weekly. I have the advantage of having this YouTube channel when it comes to record keeping. And whenever I kind of have an idea about the garden, like, I feel like this is behind last year. Oh, I don't remember getting so much on this last year or the year before, whatever. I can go back and reference the videos that I've made, which is part of the reason why I began doing things like garden tours in the first place. Is I thought, you know, at the time, the first garden tour, I think I had maybe 2,000 YouTube subscribers. I was really just thinking, I'm gonna do this for myself so I have something to reference in the winter or later when I'm planning next year's garden. And it's really, really helpful. And there are some things that I can tell you about this year's garden versus the last couple years. One, the garden feels bare to me versus the last few years because we have so much growing in the back that I did not slam pack every inch of this garden and fill it out the way that I normally do. And it's not bare. Obviously there's a ton growing, but a lot of these beds are maybe only like half full. This year, tomatoes are later than usual. Usually we are really like at the peak of harvest by 4th of July. And we just started harvesting big slicers just over the last few days. We have quite a few that are nearly ripe, but nowhere near as advanced as we usually are. And this has been the best year I've ever personally had for brassicas because it was so cool for so long. I was able to grow a lot of like cauliflower and cabbage and broccoli and stuff like that. I didn't have to pull my kale out until the beginning of July, which is absolutely unheard of for me. And we are harvesting so many cucumbers. So here at the entrance of the garden, I've got my noodle beans. Now this side was way more advanced than the other side. I think probably because the shade that this little sign casted on these as they were little. Harvesting a lot off the right side and just barely starting to see beans set on the other side. I'm going to be doing some cooking videos this week. I'm actually going to leave these on for right now because I'll come pick them whenever I do a video. But I'm going to be showing you guys how one of the ways that I like to cook noodle beans. I get asked about that a lot. This is a lettuce from Baker Creek that came out of one of the salad green mixes that I grew in a bag in my greenhouse over the winter. Just now getting to where it's about time to start saving seeds. So we're gonna do this down here in the shade where you guys can see. So this lettuce sent up a center stalk, put off a lot of flowers, and then as the flowers dried up, these little lefts came out of the end, kind of very similar to a dandelion. And if I just pinch these off, they're attached to all of these little seeds here. It's like that. It's that easy. There are my lettuce seeds. So this head of lettuce grew from one of those seeds, and then it's producing all of these little flowers and seed pods. So obviously there are a ton of seeds in just this one plant going to seed. It'll be plenty for me to be able to grow all the lettuce I could want from this plant. So what I usually do is I just come out here with an envelope, just like a little paper envelope, and I will sit here. I'll pull as this gets more dried up. I'll just grab a whole clump off and sit down and pull those little fluffs off and drop all the seeds in the paper envelope, write the type on it, and that's it. They're saved. Now here's the chamomiles. The Zlotyland chamomile. It's a Polish chamomile variety. I did do a video this week showing about harvesting and drying this. Here's a random cucumber which was left by my child, no doubt. He comes down and picks things sometimes and unfortunately forgets them. The purple potted beans and rattlesnake beans along this trellis have just exploded with growth. They're already to the top of the trellis in some places, kind of hanging off the top. I feel like that happened really fast, but it's not surprising. It's the time of year for fast growth. These cucumbers are covered in honeybees. You go, girls. Now, one thing that I've really learned over the course of years of gardening is that different years you just have like, you know, bumper crops is the term that gets used, but you'll have like a really, really great cucumber year. And the thing I love about canning is that if I have a fantastic cucumber year, I can put up a lot of pickles and relish and the things that I would make out of cucumbers. And I'll put up more than I might necessarily need in a year if it's one of those years where we have a really good year. And that gives me some wiggle room for the next year. If we don't have a great cucumber year, that I might still have some things in my stores from the year before. And that has been my experience, like having a great pepper year, a great tomato year. This year is definitely one of those years for cucumbers. I did plant a little extra because I was really hoping to get a lot because I was out of pretty much everything that was canned. I think I have a couple of jars of pickles left, and I've definitely got what I was hoping for. I grew several plants of these silver slicers. The seeds are from Hudson Valley Seed Company, and these have outperformed any other cucumber in the garden. They have grown so many cucumbers. I think off of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think I have like 5 plants of these, and I have picked multiple 5-gallon buckets of cucumbers. The thing that I'm liking about them though is that they're really good at different sizes. Like I can pick them small and make sliced pickles out of them. I can pick them big and run them through the juicer. And so far I haven't had any of these that had really like bitter skin or anything like that. They're just doing really well. Well dang, my basket's full on the first row. Oh, that's July for you. Here, there's kind of a mess of where the silver slicer cucumbers have sort of intermingled with these Armenian whites, and they're growing up each other's trellises. So I just kind of got to get down in there every time I need to harvest to make sure I'm not missing anything. You may remember earlier on in the season, I had these volunteer melons right here that I decided, well, I was going to move them down, but I was afraid that they would shock and not do well. And I was really hoping that it was a chrysanthemum melon because I didn't have seeds for them this year. Actually, someone sent me some seeds so I could plant them, but I decided to just leave them. So far, there's not any fruit set. There are some flowers, so we'll know soon. I'll be able to tell by the shape of it if that's what it is, but I ended up just leaving it, and it's going to have this trellis right here. Melons and squash don't always take super kindly to being transplanted, and sometimes they they might not just shrivel up and die, but they might shock and just never really thrive the way they would if they were able to just be left alone and grow. Check this out. The banana plants are towering above me now. So amazing. Just starting to see some baby fruits here on this Delice de la Table melon. It's doing pretty well. Probably won't be harvesting anything until the end of this month, but it's setting them. They're just tiny little fuzzy things here. I've been harvesting leeks and using them, but I need to figure out how to preserve them because they're probably going to need to get out of the garden here before too long. Made a really good leek and zucchini casserole this week that was really yummy, but I've definitely got to figure out what to do with all those because I have a lot at once. And look at this monster. This is such a mess. It is kind of glorious though. Again, I'm going to be showing you how to do multiple things in the kitchen this week. And one of those is how to make quick pickles. And I may be using the Armenian white. I have a jar of quick pickles in the fridge. All right, here's one Armenian white. Technically, this is not a cucumber. It's a melon, but you use it like a cucumber. Here's another. Oh my goodness. I've trained multiple stems up, but they keep turning around and going down as well. The thing with any fruit that you're growing on a trellis, like you really want it to grow on the trellis and hang. Here's one hanging off the edge. They stay a lot straighter and nicer whenever they're up instead of laying on the ground. Whatever Armenian whites grow on the ground down here will probably end up pretty curled and somewhat gnarly. But there are a lot on here. I've already picked a few, just grabbed those other two. And I would say there are probably somewhere in the range of about 30 that are on the smaller stages of development. One of the things that I did this week, because I had these hot banana peppers here, which these turn a darker yellow when they're like fully ripe, and I want these to reach their peak heat because they are hot peppers, and when you allow peppers to ripen, they do get hotter if they are a hot variety. I'm growing these hot banana peppers to pickle. That's why I grew them, because banana peppers just make a really good pickled pepper for eating on things, and they're really good to mix with other things. So like the few that I've already picked off of this that had turned that deeper yellow, which these others are really close, but I sliced those up with some of the cucumbers and Armenian white melons to make fridge pickles. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that this week. Fridge pickles are a really, really great way to put up a small harvest. Like, obviously I've got 10 pounds of cucumbers here behind me that I can't make fridge pickles with all of those, not for my family. It would take up so much space in my fridge, and it would take us too long to eat those. But I do usually keep about a half gallon of fridge pickles in the fridge because we will eat those fresh during this season. I prefer fridge pickles to actually processed canned pickles, because whenever you have to can them, they're going to be in the water bath for 10 to 15 minutes, and they're going to get softer and soggier. That's just the texture. But fridge pickles are going to stay really crisp. So for me, this summer, whenever there's still fresh stuff coming in from the garden, that's fridge pickle time. You don't have to make just like a massive batch at once. Like, if you're only pulling a few cucumbers out of your garden at the time, you can go and, you know, slice them up, put them in whatever size jar they'll fit in, and make the appropriate amount of brine and put over it. You can throw, if you have a couple peppers, you can throw them in with them. If you have a little bit of garlic, or, you know, you could if you have a couple of carrots, you can throw them in there. You can put a lot of things in pickle brine. You can put a zucchini in there. If you have just a little bit of everything, you just mix them together and make a pickled mix in the fridge. Because sometimes you've got this harvest and you don't know what to do with it, and that's just a really great way to use it. We've been eating a lot of quick pickles. However, with a harvest like this, you really have to make something else because that's a lot of quick pickles. So here's my little dwarf blue corn, looking lovely. Starting to see coming along. Growing up so fast. Here are my beloved Cucamelons. I have, oh look, yay! My first teeny tiny little squirt of a fruit. That makes me very happy. We emptied out the kale bed, so you can see here. So that's a big empty space in the garden. My sunflowers are beginning to open. Here, the dahlias are blooming. I've been trying to pull the dead heads. Obviously, I still have more that I need to pull off. I've got squash coming up here, more noodle beans, which, again, I'll harvest those later. Here are my dragon tongue bush beans. I was actually getting ready to pull these out because I thought they were about done and they started to put more flowers on, so I left them. So I'll get another wave of beans off of those. You guys were so right about the clematis liking its feet shaded. As soon as this artichoke got really big and I planted the squash right here and they got big, the clematis just started to take off, which is really awesome. So thank you so much for that tip. I threw the squash in just not knowing exactly how they would do here in this front garden, and they're starting to set blossoms. My artichoke, check this out, so exciting. Look at that. I'm so pumped about this. So excited. Way to go, Artie. I always kind of have like a favorite little area in the garden, and I would say this year, this bed and this other little short beds and arches, this is probably my favorite area. And you know, it's funny, it usually ends up being that way. I think just artistically with the shorter beds and the arches and all the line and angle here, it's just really easy to make this space really beautiful. We have started the harvesting of many cherry tomatoes. It's not so many that we're having to dry them yet, but definitely getting our fill every day. One of my favorite things during like this season where we're still getting cucumbers, because the cucumbers stop when it gets like super, super hot. They're usually actually done by July, but because it has been kind of a cooler trend this year, they're kind of peaking right now. But it's cool when the cucumbers overlap the cherry tomatoes, and I like to take sliced onions and have cherry tomatoes and sliced cucumbers and just make like a watered down vinegar with a little sugar and some salt in it, and do sort of like a quick pickling of those things and just make that cucumber tomato summer salad. My grandmother always made that whenever I was little, and it's one of those things that just tastes like summer to me. And I haven't made it yet because up until this point, the cherry tomatoes have all been, everybody wants to eat them, you know, like everybody's been really excited. The tomato eaters in the family have all been really excited. And there haven't been just like extra enough to accumulate. However, yesterday was the first day that a bowl of cherry tomatoes sat on the counter, and by the end of the day, there were still some in it. And so I was like, okay, we're almost to the point that I'm gonna get to make my summer salad. Look at those blue gold berries. Here's one that was done. I just think these are so pretty with those blue shoulders. Over here in the garden, look at this wild little area. This kaku-si gourd is just insane. What's crazy here is that this is like just a few seeds. This is only a few plants. Look at this. It's gonna climb up on top of the pavilion. That's where it's reaching. And I'm just gonna let it. I just wanna see how wild it can get. So, I'll go in here. Like, this is crazy. It's like a secret club in here. So here is my first one. It is ready for harvest. I had many people send me recipes after last week's tour, so I appreciate that. I feel like this one's ready. People said wait till it's no longer fuzzy, and this is not, so it's definitely a really good size. This would be like probably a little over 3 feet had it been able to grow straight down, but it kind of got caught up in there. I'm really interested to note here the different nasturtiums. I've had multiple of my nasturtium varieties have already started making their seeds, drying up. They were done when it got really hot. But a few of the varieties are still really nice. Now this may be because this is more in the shade of the kaku-si. So I'm not really sure, and I can't remember which variety this is. Does anybody know? It's from Baker Creek, I believe. But it's still flowering and looking really nice, and it's still obviously very green and alive. This pickle cucumber got left on a little too long, but it's not, I mean, it's still usable. I have learned this season that I unintentionally just broke the end off of this, trying to pick it up with my hands full of a big camera and 2 big cucumbers. So might as well taste it. I can see why you need to harvest them just at the right point probably for this flesh to still be super soft and juicy, which it is, but the skin, the rind, to not be really hard. Like I can tell that this is like right on the brink of starting to harden up. It doesn't taste like much. It definitely has like a wateriness like a cucumber, but kind of a blandness like just like a kind of summer squashy. A lot of the recipes that people were sending to me were where these were cooked in like sauces for pastas or like in a casserole, and I can definitely see that. This is like one massive squash essentially, and that's what the package said. These seeds came from In My Gardener. It said that it is a gourd, but it can be used like a squash. I really love the way that it grows. It's absolutely majestic. And what I was learning from commenters last week is that this is very commonly grown in Italian gardens and used to feed big families, because, you know, obviously one of these, this is probably, I mean, close to, I would say, you know, well over a pound, maybe close to 2 pounds. So that's a lot of food to come off of one fruit, off of a plant that's obviously capable of producing a lot of fruits. I mean, I've had a few moments already this gardening season just sitting right here looking at this plant like, wow. Here on the other side is my cheery little zinnia patch. I've started cutting zinnias and putting them in mason jars in the kitchen. If you've got zinnias growing in your garden and you're like, oh, but I want that cheery little zinnia patch, don't hesitate to cut them. They will grow more. And what you can do is, like here, you can see how this stem goes all the way down, and you can cut this stem off and see at this joint, it's putting off another blossom right here. So just cut them off and be aware of where they're sending off their side shoots, and you'll keep having flowers. It's good to cut them. That tells them to keep producing. I've got some black-eyed peas right here, looking really wonderful. They're coming up. And then let's go right over here. Oh, okra. This silver queen okra is producing quite a lot, and it's very good. Go ahead and cut these, because if I don't do it right now, they'll be too big by this evening. So far, I have not preserved any okra. We've just been eating it. However, I was sent a recipe for fermenting I'm gonna try. I'll share that with you guys. And then, of course, canning this. I like to can this pickled, and then also it's really good to can with tomatoes. Where's my basket? Oh, I see it. Everything in there is really light. I'll just set that right here. I don't have just a ton going on down this row, just some flowers and some really young things that aren't doing much. Now here on my tomato rows, I don't think that I have any tomatoes quite ready yet. I do have a bunch of massive green tomatoes though, many of which are just beginning to blush and turn. Here's the tomato that has Sweet Maya's name on it, that Dr. Witchy. It's gonna be the first one of the year. So this should be happening this week for sure. Oh, from the other side of the fence, the Cucamelons. I can't believe I forgot to talk about these guys. They've completely covered both of these trellises, even though they're only planted on the bottom of one half of this. They've just stretched over that way. Here there are gherkins, cucumbers planted at the bottom, and I've just been harvesting and letting those fall out into the ground, because when it gets really hot, these will die back, but the Cucamelons will go all the way up till the frost. They do not mind the heat. And if you can see here, they're just completely covered. We've been picking a lot of these and just eating them fresh. The main reason why I grow Cucamelons, or sometimes they're called Mexican sour gherkins, is for snacking on in the garden. However, they do make really good little quick pickles. I would not try to can these and preserve them, because they are such delicate little fruits. They just, they would get really mushy in the process of being processed, because whenever you can pickles, they have to be in the water bath again for 10 or 15 minutes. And so they do lose some of their crunch and their texture. And when it comes to Mexican sour gherkin Cucamelons, their crunch and their texture is really the best thing that they have going for them. I mean, they're good. They taste like fresh, kind of citrusy little cucumbers, and they pop when you bite down on them. Those of you who are new and have never seen these before, they're super cute, and they do make a really cute little addition to like a charcuterie board. What I like to do is do quick pickles with like very small jars of these. And I mean, quick pickles last in the fridge for a while. I think many recipes will tell you like 7 days, but they're in vinegar in the refrigerator. They can last longer than that. I mean, just use common sense and don't eat something that smells off and looks off. But we ate these as quick pickles throughout the summer, the last couple of years. But I would say the main reason we grow them is to snack in the garden. And usually I just put a handful of plants in. That's all this is just maybe like 3 plants per side of this trellis, and they just go crazy. I just dropped my basket in the garage where it's cool to go back out here. That's when I saw the Cucamelons, is when I came out. Since I want to work on those cucumbers today, I definitely want them as fresh as possible. If you have harvested cucumbers and you couldn't get to processing them right away, just soak them in some cold water and they'll bring the life back to them if they're starting to feel a little rubbery. So I knew this would happen at some point. It always does, but my squash have begun to succumb to you know, squash bugs or maybe vine borers. Sometimes it looks very similar. So I'm gonna just start tearing these out. I'm gonna continue to harvest what is available on the rest of the summer squash for just a little bit longer, and then even if they're still somewhat producing, I'll be tearing those out as well. Now, I'm getting the question a lot, how do you deal with squash bugs? So this has been a battle that I've been fighting for years now. They're just really, really bad in my area. And there are a lot of different things that you read. People say to deal with borers, to kind of like wrap aluminum foil around the base of your plants. Some people will tell you, you know, diatomaceous earth, neem oil, like the different things that get suggested for organic gardening. I have yet to have success with any really proactive measures outside of hand picking. And truly, whenever I get to the point that I've got, I mean, just like this year, I have like 20 something squash plants here in this row. There was just no way to really stay on top of hand picking. Even from where I'm sitting, I just see multiple clusters of squash bug eggs. I can see multiple areas where I can see squash bugs on these plants, because I kind of just was like, well, it is what it is. Once they get to this point, I just stop fighting them. We've harvested a lot of squash. We've been eating squash regularly for about 6 weeks now. And my approach, considering the fact that I am not willing to spend an hour plus a day hand-picking squash bugs for the hope of getting some squash, my approach is that I usually tear them all out and then replant them again in the fall. This was actually a pretty successful year for squash for me. There have been years that I've gotten very little in the spring, but with any sort of pest that you're dealing with, they have life cycles. And if you're having a hard time, if your growing season is long enough, a lot of times you can grow the same things later on in the year and not deal with any pest pressure at all, because the life cycles of those insects are not at the stage in the fall that they are in the spring or early summer. And in tearing out this sea of squash here, I'll rest this area for just a couple of weeks, maybe add some compost back to it, some worm castings, just kind of give the soil a boost again. And in that process, these okra over here on this side are going to be able to just get really big, and there won't be any competition here for light or resources. I mean, they're planted in separate rows, but you know, there's a time for everything. So we've eaten a lot of squash. I'll still get what I can take for the next week or so, and then they're gonna go. Also, the thing that my hope is with that is that these winter squash over here can continue ripening their fruits, because I want to harvest as many of these as possible. So I have quite a few spaghetti squash here on the ground that are getting pretty close to being harvested. I've already harvested about 15 off of these few plants. It looks like I'll probably get another 10 or so off these plants. That's like 5 plants, I think, so that's not too bad. So the Beauregard sweet potatoes are making their way onto my potato patch, and the melons are encroaching as well. I still have one round of potatoes down here on the end to dig, and it's time for them, so that's on my to-do list towards the earlier part of this week. But I've got some space here, and I am going to go ahead and reseed some potatoes. I have some more seed potatoes inside, and back here where there's still open space, what I'll probably do instead of doing this full row is I'll do like the second half of both of these, so that the other things that are growing here don't, you know, choke them out while they're still really young. My hope by giving these as much time as possible is that they might get a little bit bigger, but the way they're dying back now, they're not going to get any more size. It's time to get them out of the ground. This is a glorious mess. Look at this. So much food. This year has definitely been a learning process for me as a gardener, as a grower. We have so much more gardening space this year than I've ever had before. You guys have watched me garden in that front raised bed garden for the last few years, and that was a lot for me. And then this year, adding the high tunnel and these in-ground gardening spaces, we tripled, and also the cottage garden, we tripled the square footage which we were gardening. And that's why you see like the big open spaces in the front garden, because normally what would happen is I was pulling out spring crops, which were normally over much sooner than they were this year. I was doing things like throwing more squash in, succession sowing to stay on top of being able to harvest around having the squash bugs. Whereas this year, I wasn't sowing more squash because I was harvesting tons of squash from back here. So it's definitely a learning curve, and it's a different year. The weather's been a little different this year than usual, but so far I feel really good about it. I tell you guys all the time to make grace for yourself, to have a classroom, and I'm doing the exact same thing. This is a classroom for me in learning to grow on a larger scale. I've given away a lot of food this year because we were remodeling our kitchen, and so a lot of this stuff started to come in, and I was feeling really panicked about not being able to put it all up to the level that I'd hoped to. And then I kind of had to stop and practice what I preach. Hey, you know what? If I have to give away the food this spring while we get our spaces ready to preserve, next spring, whenever I'm more comfortable growing on this scale, when we're not remodeling our kitchen, I'll be able to make the absolute most of it. And again, I share that with you because we should all have the grace to have a classroom. I garden to grow food for my family and also to further my education to grow food for my family. And whenever you're taking that stance, it's not all about what you're getting right now. It's about what you're getting right now and what you're getting to carry with you for next time and the next time and the next time, and what you're teaching your kids and what you are sowing into your lifetime in experience and in learning. And that's very important too. And it's really easy whenever you're in this time of our lives, our culture, our earth, where there are tumultuous things happening and you're experiencing seeing, you know, like empty shelves or not being able to get certain things. It's easy to kind of get caught up in this frenzy of, I've got to grow food now, you know, and kind of get awoken to the fact that it is important to grow your own food and locally source your food, and it is important to shorten that chain of food getting from where it grows to your table. And while I love the urgency that so many people are like saying this is important, because it is important, I also know that if you don't take a long haul approach to learning to grow food, that panic in you is just going to grow whenever you fail. And I heard something this week that really struck me, and I just keep thinking about it. I was listening to this podcast. The guy, he was a guest on this podcast that I sometimes listen to from a guy called Mark Casto. And this guy that was the guest, he said something about how it's okay to fail. And if you're not willing to take risks, you'll never fail, but you'll never move forward. And he said it's just important to fail forward. And I thought that's exactly it. Like, that is exactly how I want to approach growing food. I want to be willing to take risks. I want to be willing to try new things, sometimes for the sake of completely just learning and watching, you know, rows of plants die back because of bugs that I knew were not in my capacity to combat fully successfully. Like, that's not a failure to me. I learned a lot about growing that this year. And even though technically it's a failure, because technically those things are dying, I'm failing forward. I know how to move forward from that. And that, I think, is really awesome. And it makes me feel more secure whenever I'm looking at empty places on the shelves, that I don't feel a fearful urgency. I've got to learn how to do this right now. I feel a sense of, okay, I'm just going to keep moving forward. I'm going to keep learning. If I fail, I'm going to fail forward. So I've got another jungle place back here, which is completely full of butternut squash. I'm talking like this space is full of butternut squash. I've been testing these, and the skins, they're actually starting to turn color a little bit and tan up, but the skins are still just a little soft, so they're not really ready for me to mess with yet. Powdery mildew back here has pretty well knocked out these New England pie pumpkins, but they're still ripening the fruit. There's still enough green leaves on here that they're not dead, so I'm just leaving them alone. I combated that for a while, and I see several pumpkins that are turning orange here, so I feel okay about it. Random purple zinnia growing in the middle of all of this. That's because the compost that's on this is from my farm, so those are from last year's plants reseeding. I always save the high tunnel for last because it's a lot cooler in here, and also the shade cloth makes it a little easier to video once it's getting late in the morning. I've got more hot banana peppers back here, which is exactly what I showed you guys up in the front garden. And you can see that these are, the plants are a little bigger, but they're not really producing any more fruit than the front. So that'll be interesting to see who outdoes the other. Some of these plants are big and beautiful, but are just starting to set fruits. Some have a little bit on there, but definitely, I feel great about how my peppers look this year. I think they're going to be really strong plants that give a lot of harvest, but a lot of them just aren't really producing a lot yet, and that's okay. I'm very closely watching my tomatoes out here, which none are even blushing yet. Okay, that's on par with what I expected. I did a video a couple of days ago about some of the problems that were happening with the tomatoes out here. Nothing that I feel like is really out of the ordinary. One thing that I am planning on doing this week is pruning much heavier. I have pruned, but not like ruthlessly, and I think that we need some more airflow. We do have fans for the high tunnel, which we've not set up. It really has stayed cooler in here, and with the high sidewalls up, I mean, just the air is always moving through here, but we'll definitely be putting those fans up. They're not super huge or anything, but we have about 4 fans that go in here. And it's getting to be about that time that I really feel like we need to keep the air moving. So far, I feel really good about our first year with the high tunnel. We put this up, I mean, it was done at the beginning of May. So everything that's in here was transplanted in here less than 8 weeks ago. Everything in here was started from seed around the middle of February, beginning of February, and then transplanted in here at the beginning of May. So crazy growth. Everything I feel like looks pretty good. I feel okay about, again, the learning experience. Definitely starting to, you know, see some things that I'd like to do differently next year. I want to work on our soil. We brought this all in and then planted immediately, so we have not done any sort of like tweaking or testing to this soil. For a first year though, I would call this a success already, just for how well it's done so far. And that's without getting really any harvest out of it yet. It's already a success because look how much we've learned. Look how much progress we've made. I was seeing blossoms on these Sugar Rush peach peppers earlier. I really, really like these. They're some of my favorite peppers to make hot sauce with. Also, little baby blossoms and the very beginning of some eggplants. Super pumped about that. And what I think will be the first like big harvest in the high tunnel this year is going to be these jalapeno peppers. They're just about ready. I'm not cutting them today because I've got all those cucumbers to process, and I want to cut these and immediately start processing them, but they're really loaded. Here are more hot banana peppers, which are going to be pickled. They're still kind of light green, so I'm going to give them some more time. I was also noting this week how healthy these peppers look. These are habanadas and jalapenos, so these are my heatless peppers. I've got them down here on this end, and not a lot of fruit on these yet. I planted these later than the other ones, but definitely a lot of blossoms and just really healthy looking plants. Wow, look at that climbing triple crop. That's a big one. These tomato plants back here, even though they are now all taller than the trellises, they're actually 2 weeks behind the tomato plants in the front. They've just been able to grow faster, I think because they had all of this new compost in here, so they had a lot of nitrogen, which is going to push a lot of growth, and just not having to combat the bacterial and fungal stuff that the front plants have had to deal with. They're not in the harsh sun, so they're not being stunted by anything, and they're just taking off. But the fruit is still 2 weeks behind the front. So whereas those are getting really, really big and they're starting to blush and turn colors, these are still growing. And we're just seeing a few tomatoes in here really start to get larger size. So they'll start changing color here in a couple weeks. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today for this garden tour. This is kind of the wow time of year. The July is usually what I consider to be the garden's peak as far as the wow factor goes. Of course, there are times of year that we're getting lots of food that are more things like leafy greens or roots or different things. But as far as fruit bearing goes, the peppers, the tomatoes, the cucumbers, all of that stuff, eggplants, it really starts to come in now, and just continue to do so for the next 4 weeks. Now is the time to really reap what you've sown. For me in my zone, I know for some of you it'll be like over the next month or two. I do love getting to share it with you so much. I will see you on the next tour and in the vlog between now and then. I've got a lot of kitchen stuff coming up where I'm showing you what we're gonna do with all this food that's coming out of the garden. Thanks again. I bless you. Until next time.